Hi everyone, I hope you're all well. I just want to start this video by sending my condolences to John's family. This model we can see here right now is one that I received from his collection. At this point in the video I'm just kind of looking at the model and deciding what I'm going to do with the paint scheme. After some thought about it, I decided that I would recreate the colour scheme that John was going for. I'm just going to put in a couple of pictures to show where we end up with the model, and if you like the look of this, continue watching and we'll show you how to get there. So this is my take on a recreation of the colour scheme that John originally started. Now the hair on this model caused me a lot of issue. I picked up the wrong paint and essentially kind of caused a lot of issues for myself, which spiraled into just a complete overwhelming fear of absolute failure and anxiety. So I decided I want to talk a little bit about perfection paralysis and just the signs to look out for. I know for me a big thing with perfection paralysis is procrastination. Just waiting for the perfect moment for everything to kind of slot into place to even be able to get to start doing a project. Sometimes can take me days or weeks to start a specific type of project because I have to set it up that I get the perfect amount of sleep. I wake up in the perfect state of mind to then be able to just attack it and do it. And sometimes that's true, but it's not for all projects. It's only certain projects, and I think it's because I build things up in my head too much about what I want from this project. Like this one, to be fair. Because this one was a memorial piece to John, it's taken me about 3 weeks to get this done. Normally it would only take me a week, maybe 2 if I had some setbacks like I did. But with this one, things just got on top of me and I had to kind of step away and start filming some other videos and then come back to it. One of the big things with perfection paralysis is also over planning, and essentially all you're doing with over planning is just delaying the progress with indecisions and obsessing over tiny details that in the end don't matter, or at least they don't matter until you get to the point within the paint job where the details are starting to come in, and then you can step back for a day or so, sleep on it, set yourself up a little plan about where you want to place the details and come back to it with a fresh mindset and do it. Or you can spend days and days and days in paralysis with over planning, if not weeks, and not actually getting anything done. Another feature of perfection paralysis for some is a fear of failure. Realistically, perfection is rarely attainable, and being obsessed with making every step perfect, for me to a degree, is a motivating factor, because every time I tick off another step that I've done, I get a sense of accomplishment. But every now and then when something goes wrong, and it's not every time something goes wrong, but just on certain projects when I build things up too much in my head about it needing to be special or perfect, when something goes wrong, it can just really derail me, and I know it can halt progress on projects for me and others that I've spoken to about this. So try to consciously think about these sorts of things and not let them get on top of you. The mental effects of perfection paralysis are increased anxiety. Due to just pressures that we're putting onto ourselves, it increases stress and anxiety, and this also leads to you being a lot more likely to burn out on projects. It's nice to have a few different projects on the go at the same time that are very different from each other, so that once you can feel yourself getting even anywhere near a burnout, you can switch to the next one, freshen things up, do that for a couple of weeks, then come back to the last project and continue. One of the main things is just continually allow yourself to keep painting, to keep growing, and when you do come to a hurdle, don't necessarily stop and get overwhelmed by the project. Sometimes you just have to take the challenge and push yourself to actually grow as a painter. Striving for perfection on everything you do all the time will always end in limiting your growth. One of the things on this project that really hit me hard, allowing a lot of things to kind of get to me, was when I did the hair. I covered the hair in techno green, then I was supposed to water down a Beeltown green shade, apply that to the hair, and then quickly wipe off just the highest edges to allow the fluorescent techno green to shine through. I ended up picking, I think it was warpstone green. You can see when I'm applying the paint to the hair, suddenly I get to a part in there where I'm just wiping it off. Luckily, it didn't cause texture issues on the paint, but that was me not being patient and me kind of suddenly realizing this isn't working how I wanted it to work. So I changed directions. Once the hair was dry, it just didn't look anywhere near what I wanted it to look like, and I ended up stepping away for a couple of days. That's one of the big parts of overcoming perfection paralysis. Not allowing a project to get on top of you too much is knowing when to step away, and not step away as in give up on the project and don't come back to it, but step away from the project just for a few days and just set yourself a few things that you want to do in the meantime. So what I did was I spent that time basically just designing a waist extender for my Chaos Knight. I got that 3D printing. Then I came back with a fresh set of eyes and I thought of a plan and set myself up a system of steps to achieve the goal of fixing the mistakes that I had made on this model. I did this by clearly thinking about the steps that would be needed, writing it down, and following these steps of dealing with those mistakes and not just letting it be, well, I need to throw the whole thing in isopropyl and start again. Because in this instance, that's not what I needed to do. I knew that I needed to dry brush it white and then come back in with some form of lighter paint and feather it out into the recesses. And I did this by setting up an achievable list of goals, and it wasn't starting with the hair. I know what I needed to do to fix the hair, but I didn't need to start the project again with fixing the hair because that's going to lead to frustration. So I moved on to other things that were small steps in the process of painting that I could tick off and get done and get some small wins to once again get the sails under my feet and get moving with the project. And when I was happy and in the flow of painting, that's when I tackled the hair, because at that point I'm warmed up, in the right mindset, and I can take the challenge one stroke at a time and apply that to a brush and fix the model. Just making minor adjustments to the hair with each pass to get the paint job to where I was going to be happy with it. And ultimately in the end, I'm very happy with how this paint job has come out. There's a few imperfections here and there that I need to tidy up, but those are things that I can come back to in a few months' time when I'm just bored and I have a bit of time and I just feel like today's the day I'm gonna spend a few hours and just clean up some stuff and get this model finished to the standard that I want. One of the big things when it comes to painting and perfection paralysis is learning to embrace imperfections. To achieve your goals and continue to grow, you must learn to embrace imperfections. And like Bob Ross said, sometimes you have happy accidents. And these accidents or imperfections can, with patience, become positive key focal points of a piece you're working on. Bear in mind that sometimes in the moment, what looks like an imperfection later on can actually really become a key selling point of a model. If you apply the right attitude to how you fix the problem or imperfection, it can create a variance in your typical painting scheme that stands out as something very positive. Sometimes it doesn't. That is life. It doesn't always work out to be positive, but it doesn't always work out to be negative, and humans tend to steer towards negative as the first thing that comes to mind when we don't always need to steer in that direction. I think a large part of painting and embracing imperfection is understanding that as long as you're working with thin down paints and you're practicing patience, which is a big key, because I nearly screwed up the hair majorly. I was lucky that the paint was just wet enough that with my wet brush I was able to clean some of it off. If it had been another few minutes before I decided, it's likely that I would have had to have completely stripped the hair, because the paint would have been cured just enough to pull up in chunks rather than wash away. At that point I should have just stopped, let it dry, but I got lucky. So practicing patience, although I'm not always very good at it, is something that is definitely key to painting and key to moving forwards with your abilities, because when you try and learn something new, it's not going to be a case of you just do it and it works. Very often it's going to take sometimes years to learn something. At the moment I'm kind of dabbling with learning non-metallic metal. I've only done a couple of small axes here and there. It's going to take a while for me to learn non-metallic metal, like a long time. I'm very much a visual learner. If somebody is in front of me and shows me the paint they're using, how they thin it, how they apply the paint to the piece, the angles they're using their brush, etc., generally I can mimic that very quickly and learn things. There's certain things that just watching the video and mimicking the person to be able to develop the skills to then start applying that into real life, it doesn't always work. So for non-metallic metal, for me, that's the one that isn't just working like that for a video. So I think it's definitely going to be one of those things that if I can't get it, it'll be a case of maybe taking some classes and actually visually learning in person, which is how I learn best. Another aspect of overcoming perfection paralysis is seeking feedback. Having a group of friends, whether it be in person or online, a mixture of both, it doesn't matter, but having a group of friends that you respect to creatively criticize your work is important. People who will offer advice with their feedback and then help you set realistic steps to then achieve your goals is an invaluable thing to have, especially for painting. 99% of the battle of improving as a painter comes from the irrational thoughts in our heads that's telling us we're not good enough and we're never going to get it, when realistically it just takes time, patience and practice to be able to learn new skills. So don't allow these intrusive thoughts to stunt your progress. Also have the realization that not everything you paint is going to be the best thing you've painted. You likely quite often will go from painting the best model you've painted to date to something that looks like absolute crap. And it's a learning step. Even if you don't like it, just finish the model. Put it down, start the next thing. Paint something you're familiar with. Build that confidence back up to knock out a few more models that you know are of a standard that you enjoy and that you like to paint. And then maybe in the meantime, whilst doing that, you clean off the model that you just painted that you absolutely hate, and you start again and you learn from the process and you just do it better each time. What I can say about this model is it's a really awesome model and I'm happy that I stuck with it and have it finished now. This model I think is one of my better paint jobs. I'm still not 100% happy with the hair, but it's not too bad. But I think it's one of the better paint jobs that I've done so far. So I'm happy that I stuck it out, because at the end of the day it proved to me that I can overcome problems and get past perfection paralysis. And if I allow myself to get past perfection paralysis, it's potentially going to lead to me creating something of a really high quality. Before we get onto the rust, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the exhaust manifold. It's a really nice paint, but I can't judge whether it coats in one. The copper, steel and white aluminium and Vallejo metal colour, for me at least, they all cover in one application. When I painted exhaust manifold, my brush was a little bit wet. More wet than usual, so I'm pretty sure that might have led to the reason why it didn't cover in one go, but I can follow up on that in a later video and do some more testing. Honestly though, I don't mind applying 2 coats, and if it doesn't apply in 1 coat, that's also fine because it means you can use it as a kind of a weathering agent on other metals and just do 1 slightly thin coat, just to add some variance in the colour of your metals, which is pretty nice. Now with doing the rust on this model, I wanted to try something different. We're going to start as usual with Dirty Down's rust. We're going to apply 1 layer, dab on in some spots a 2nd layer, let those dry, and then we're going to apply a 3rd layer. And you can see a really nice dark coloration with a lot of variance within the tones, which is really nice, what you want to get with the darker sides of rust. And once you have the rust looking how you want for the darker tones, before we go ahead and varnish to seal that in, we're just going to use a brush and a foam, and we're going to attack the edge of that blade. We want to pull a little bit of that silver back. I've also gone around with the brush and just touched some of the edges of the blade where you would naturally have rust chipped off during combat. I decided for the next step that I wanted to push myself a little bit. With this project getting on top of me, I decided at this point I was in the swing of painting again, and to prove to myself that I'm going to start moving forwards and not letting these types of projects get on top of me, I wanted to push myself to do something a little bit different with my rust textures. Every time I do rust, I try and change the recipe slightly just to improve on what I'm doing, to try and develop a nicer, more realistic rust and metal effect. I really enjoyed painting this blade, and I really enjoyed pushing myself further than I have on other paint jobs, and I think that's one of the things that really helps with trying to break out of perfection paralysis, is constantly trying to push yourself but not putting a stress on yourself, because you don't need to put the stress on yourself. We're supposed to be having fun, and even though we want to do well and we want to always consistently paint something better and better than the last thing we've painted, just focusing on the aspect of painting that is, it's a hobby. Whether it's your job or not, it doesn't matter. It's still a hobby. We started doing it because we love doing it and have fun doing it. So we need to remember the point of painting is to de-stress, to have fun, to try new things and exercise your brain, doing things that you wouldn't necessarily normally do, which I think is a positive message overall to send. And I hope that's what comes through in my videos. Thank you for watching and supporting me. I really do appreciate it. And next up, we're going to come back with Yellow Rust by Dirty Down. We're just going to splotch this all over the model. Same again, let it dry. I'm putting 2 coats on. And then we're going to come back with a moist sponge, and we're just going to dab in certain areas to allow some of the previous layers of dark rust to shine through. Again, focusing slightly on taking a little bit of the rust off of the edge of the blade, but leaving a lot more of the yellow rust on the edge of the blade. So this time what I ended up doing was coming in with some Arctic Blue by scale 75, and at this point I'm just doing some edge highlighting around the meat cleaver, focusing on not only doing fine edge highlights around the cleaver but also stippling little bits in here and there to act as slight dings and scrapes and bumps. Doing this in an uneven way creates more of a realistic natural texture within the finish of the meat cleaver's edges. Then I decided to try and incorporate some of the Arctic Blue into the actual blade. So I do a pullback motion and I'm just dragging from the inside of the blade's edge towards that tip all the time, creating little scratch lines with the thin down paint. I'm trying my hand at a really basic rustic kind of non-metallic metal. Now I know that there is a metallic under there, but I matte varnish. You lose pretty much all of the shine and what makes it metallic with the matte varnish. Plus we're going over it with various rust paints, and now we're coming back in and going over it with a matte paint in the Arctic Blue. We're just trying to establish a rustic highlight. I ended up placing an extra layer or 2 of Arctic Blue on the rear face of the blade, just trying to see how far I could push it. And although I put quite a lot on the front facing blade, as it's dried, it's definitely come out a lot less detailed, so that is one of the fixes that I will do. I'm going to come back in and make it match the rear facing side. I really quite like the aesthetics of the rear side of the meat cleaver. You can see in the video that I clearly have quite a distinguished line of Arctic blue on the front facing side of the blade. For doing this part of the process, I'd thinned down my paint slightly more, hence why it's dried more translucent than on the rear. Just be mindful of things like that. Sometimes it's good to just make up a formula of a paint and just get some out as and when you need it to keep the paint job consistent. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then like and subscribe, and let's check out our final results. Thank you for your support.